In the high-altitude town of Kruševo, where the clouds often tangle in the chimneys, 18-year-old Petar sat among half-packed boxes. In a week, he would leave for the university in Skopje, trading the crisp mountain air for the humid rush of the capital. He felt like a bird perched on a precipice, unsure if his wings were strong enough for the flight. The upcoming Easter weekend felt less like a celebration and more like a final anchor holding him to a life he was outgrowing. A sharp knock on his door broke his reverie. His grandmother, Elena, stood there with a basket of plain white eggs and a jar of golden beeswax. She didn't ask if he was busy. She simply stated that the saranje, the traditional wax-resist decorating, could not happen without him. Petar followed her into the kitchen, the familiar scent of wood smoke and dried chamomile grounding his racing thoughts. Elena lit a small alcohol lamp and held a pasulka, a wooden stylus with a tiny copper funnel, over the flame. She explained that the patterns they would draw were not mere decorations, but prayers for protection and symbols of a new beginning. She dipped the tool into the wax, her hands steady despite her age, tracing a delicate sunburst onto the shell of an egg. She told him that the wax protects the white of the egg from the red dye, preserving the light within the color. Petar took the stylus, his fingers feeling clumsy compared to hers. He tried to mimic the zito, the wheat pattern that symbolized growth and harvest. Elena leaned over, her hand gently guiding his wrist to steady the flow of the hot wax. She whispered that every line he drew was a part of his story that would remain even when everything else changed. The heat of the wax and the shared silence created a bridge between his childhood and the man he was becoming. Once the eggs were patterned with hidden designs, it was time for the boyanje. Petar carefully lowered the wax-covered eggs into a steaming pot of deep crimson dye. He watched as the shells vanished into the red liquid. He realized that, like the eggs, he was about to be submerged into a new environment, and he wondered what patterns he had drawn on himself would survive the change. As the great Saturday sun set, the mountain fog rolled in, thick and mysterious. Elena handed Petar a tall, slender candle, and they joined the stream of townspeople climbing the steep, winding stairs toward the church of St. Nicola. The atmosphere was heavy with anticipation, the quiet hum of the crowd echoing off the stone walls of the narrow alleys. Inside the church, the air was thick with the scent of incense and old wood. When the clock struck midnight, the priest emerged with the eternal flame. Petar watched as the light traveled through the dark sanctuary, person to person, until it reached him. As his candle caught the flame, the golden light illuminated the faces of neighbors he had known his whole life, making the vast church feel as intimate as a living room. Returning home in the early hours of Easter morning, the house was filled with the aroma of Milo bread. Elena sat across from Petar at the kitchen table for the krskanje. She picked a bright red egg, its wax-patterned sunburst now gleaming white against the crimson. Petar chose his wheat-patterned egg, feeling a sudden, fierce pride in the work of his own hands. They prepared for the traditional duel, the egg tapping that would determine who had the strongest spirit for the year ahead. After the clack of the eggs, Elena noticed Petar's hesitation as he looked at his suitcase again. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a special egg she had dyed alone, one with a pattern of a soaring bird. She pressed it into his palm, telling him that while the mountain would always be here, he was meant for the sky. She reminded him that a person's roots are not chains, but the very things that give them the strength to reach upward. At dawn, Petar walked to the Macedonian Monument, the futuristic white structure that overlooked the valley. As the sun broke over the peaks, the valley below glowed like the red dye in Elena's pot. He looked at the red egg in his hand, the wax bird etched upon it, and finally understood. He wasn't leaving Kruševo behind. He was carrying the light and the wax of his heritage with him into the world. He was ready to fly.